The first time Roman saw Flora is when he was a kid. He's attending a party in Barco's residence. She is the most beautiful girl in his eyes at that time. Suddenly, Anthony appeared out of nowhere and Roman asked who Flora was. Anthony tells him that she's Flora from the Laurence family, also known as the Flower of Laurence. Back to the present, Roman came to Anthony's room, and he was surprised to see how much Roman had changed. While this is his first time to see Anthony, Roman is already annoyed by him. He sat across from Anthony. Then he immediately noticed that there were people in the room, and Anthony made them leave before he arrived, which meant that Anthony had a secret to tell. Knowing he had to act happy, Roman smiled and told Anthony that his appearance had been effortlessly changing. Looking at Anthony's eyes, he said how nice it was to see him again. When Anthony started talking about what he did in the past, it was the right time for Roman to start digging into it. Then Anthony revealed that Roman had been sleeping around with his cousin when he was already engaged, and Roman immediately knew that his hunch was right. But he also knew Anthony didn't tell him everything. He continued to say that coming to this party meant Roman agreed with his offer. Roman says nothing when Anthony tells him they should discuss his marriage to the Barco family. And then suddenly, he's hit with the real Roman's memory. He was standing at Anthony's front door. Roman intended to make peace with Anthony because his political marriage with Laurence had caused a strain on their relationship. Anthony introduced him to his cousin Emily, and they started drinking together. But Roman refused when he was about to pour him wine, and Anthony used the chance to insult him because he would marry Flora. Roman was about to explain their marriage, but Anthony told him it wouldn't affect their friendship. He was glad to hear it and started to drink heavily. When he woke up after getting wasted, he was shocked that he had been sleeping with Emily. Then Anthony confronts him, who doesn't remember what happened that night. Roman has no idea what happened that led him to sleep with her, and he cannot explain himself. A few moments later, Roman sat with Anthony, his body trembling as Anthony told him he had slept with one of the Barcos. Anthony threatened him to marry one of the Barcos' family members, or he'll tell everyone about what happened tonight, and his marriage will be cancelled. He managed to manipulate Roman, and he was left with no choice. Finally, Roman understood what happened. The real Roman wouldn't be able to handle being dragged into a scandal and facing the critics for being a commoner. His father would be furious at him. But the real Roman doesn't want to break his marriage with Flora, so he chooses to end his life. He took a sip of the wine and thought of how pathetic the real Roman's life is that he has to resolve in death to solve his problems. Anthony told him that with his marriage with one of the Barco's family, they'd be the strongest alliance in the Northeast. Then Roman immediately refused it because he was not impressed with the benefits. Anthony told him that he had no choice because he would expose what happened that night to the world if he refused his offer, to which Roman answered by lifting his feet to the table. Because of that, Anthony was deeply annoyed as he looked at his calm and carefree attitude. Back in the ballroom, Sophie talks with one of her friends when she notices Roman behind her. She greets him again and feels dejected when he tells her he must leave the party. Other people started approaching him when they knew he was leaving, and Roman told them he'd meet them again. After that, he gracefully walked out of the ballroom when suddenly he heard Kevin yell. He looked over to the field and was shocked when he saw Kevin was fighting with another knight. His helmet fell, and he stumbled to the ground. Chris was shocked to see Kevin go and pick a fight with them. A few minutes earlier, when the other knights gossiped about Roman being a useless human being, Kevin was mad. But Chris told him to ignore it. Then, both started talking about how stupid Kevin looked with his oversized helmet. They approached Kevin and bullied him because he was just a child, and Chris wondered if they were gossiping all day instead of training. One of them said that he was better at using his weapon than Kevin without even training, and mocking Roman for being the screw-up in the family. Kevin hears all of it and becomes angry. He tells the knight that Roman is more than that. He then grabs his hand that perches on his head and yells at him to take his words back. The knight punches him in return, and Chris is prepared to fight if he has to. He's ready to pull his sword and think about the current relationship between the Barcos and Demetrius. If he confronts those knights from Barco, the problem goes back to Roman. Then Kevin suddenly told the knights that he had no intention of dealing with goons dressed as knights. The knights scoffed at Kevin's remark and tried to hit him, but someone grabbed his hand before he could punch Kevin, surprising everyone. It turns out Roman stopped the knight to hit Kevin, and he glared at him in return. Then Roman slaps him before he can say anything, and he's shocked by it. He couldn't believe someone like Roman could hit him that fast, and when he tried to mock him, Roman immediately slapped him again, but this time harder than before. When he tries to talk to Roman, he hits him harder repeatedly until he kneels to the ground. He was stunned and unable to fathom what was going on. When he looked Roman in the eyes, he instructed him to lift his head high. Meanwhile, Anthony is still in his room. He wonders what happened to Roman because he is not the one he knew. As he remembers their conversation, he threatens Roman to fulfill his end of the bargain, or he will spread the rumors, but Roman smirks and tells him to do whatever he wants. Then Roman tells him that he needs to be more kind to him because he chose to break the marriage, and, as a result, his plan still works. But Anthony is already rude to him, and Roman has threatened to assist the Laurences in their war against the Barcos out of a personal vendetta. Roman can say all that because he knows the true powerhouse in the Northeast is the Dimitri. As he looks down at Anthony, who's trembling because of his threat, he asks what he'll do from now on. Anthony chooses to let the matter go because he knows his family wouldn't have any chance to win if Roman interfered. And now he realizes that not only his appearance has changed, but his demeanor as well. The moron he used to know is replaced with the person he doesn't know at all, and he's terrified by this new Roman. Suddenly, someone knocks on his door, and Anthony yells at him to go away, but he's shocked to hear that Roman is fighting his knight. People gather outside the castle, watching Roman beat the knight to a pulp, until the knight begs Roman to stop and Kevin and Chris tell him he's had enough. He should consider the impact on his family's image. However, Roman will decide when he'll stop punishing the knight for his actions, and then Anthony strolls among the crowd and demands an explanation for what happened. He points his finger at Roman and warns him that he will not allow his acts against one of his guards and that he must make an apology. But Roman wonders why he should apologize. He looks at the knight and says that he's been harassing his knights and mocking them, which technically means he didn't do anything wrong. On the contrary, Anthony was adamant that Roman had gone too far. His threats mean nothing to Roman as he tells him that his grudge can affect their alliance, so he advises him to behave from now on. Then Roman glares at Anthony and tells him to decide what he will do now, and Anthony recalls Roman's threat of interfering in his war against Laurence if he pulled another act. Anthony grits his teeth, knowing he has no choice against the matter and agreeing with Roman. That makes Roman glad because Anthony had made the right decision before he averts his guts toward the knight, who still kneels on the ground. Then Roman raised his hand and told him to grit his teeth. The slapping sound echoes right after, and other people help the knight when Roman is finished, while Roman wipes the blood from his hand as he tells Chris and Kevin to move because they'll be leaving now. Everyone, from the guest and the knight, including Anthony, is shocked at how different Roman is now, and they now know that the moron they used to mock has turned into someone else entirely. On their way home, Kevin apologizes to Roman for making such a fuss. Chris also apologizes for not doing anything while his family name was mocked and Kevin was bullied. Roman stays silent for a while. Then he thanked both of them for being patient and waiting for him. Because of that, they indirectly avoid the worst possible outcome by enduring slander and assault. Roman doesn't want their sorry because no one should dare to assault people of Dimitri, and he tells both of them to remember those people. He wants them to keep their thirst for revenge alive because he's someone who wants to rule all, and they should have the same mindset as him. Both Chris and Kevin listened to him and silently agreed with Roman. The next day, Hans informs Roman of the Barco's family's recent activity, which has been quite unusual from the Black Moon. Roman reads the report and aligns it with what he knows about Barco. They became famous when one of them joined the central government, and their military was not very strong, just like Roman had expected from doing his study. Hans questions why their military is so weak, considering they are part of the great family in the Northeast, to which Roman responds that it is proof of how strong the central government is. Roman learned about the Salamander continent. It has 2 empires and 6 kingdoms. Among them, Cairo is the weakest due to its borders with all others and lack of mountains. It often faced invasions, so it joined the central government for protection. As a result, the central government gains authority over absolute mandatory military service. If an aristocratic family refuses, they are labeled traitors, and soldiers are sent to bring them down. After defeating the family and seizing the territory, the kingdoms that assisted in the attack were awarded a piece of the land, while the remainder was handed to nobles loyal to the central government. Hans is shocked when Roman tells him that the central government's influence makes the Barcos strong, and they can take huge loans from the gold bank. Roman already knew that the Barcos had earned the loan with a significant guarantee, and Hans claims that the money was mostly utilized to pay a mercenary company comprised of rank soldiers. He mentions the Barcos completed their required military duty, and will likely assault the Laurences in half a month. When Roman acknowledges the fact, Hans quickly realizes that Laurence has a high chance of losing, and Roman confirms it by saying that if they choose to defend themselves, they would only be able to do so for a month. Roman sat there in silence and contemplated his options. He promised Anthony not to interfere, but knew he couldn't let Barco get the upper hand after threatening him. His family has the strongest military power in the northeast region, and Barco wouldn't stand a chance against them. But interfering with his family's power is worthless. The other nobles don't consider him a threat because of his reputation, so he needs a chance to amp up his status right now. He immediately jumps from his chair and tells Hans he'll ask what his father had promised him. Meanwhile, people were taken aback in town when they saw a soldier walk among them, his armor smeared in blood. He is a mercenary named Lucas, and as he takes off his helmet, he notices that Dmitri has stayed the same. Then Lucas went to the ironworks shop and asked for his armor to be fixed. As he sat, he told the owner that his last fight was a mess and he almost died. The owner observes his sword and notices that it is not of the best quality, with an exasperated sigh. Lucas says that he also knows about it because it almost cost him his life. Knowing that the Dmitri Ironworks is the best in the kingdom, the owner offers Lucas a new gear set. But it'll take some time. Lucas had no problem with it because he'll also take some time off in Dmitri. He was sick and tired of war. As he strolls around, he sees a group of people gathering near a notice board and is curious about it. Lucas wondered if another war was coming, so he quickly approached the board. Then, he was stunned when he read that it was recruitment for private soldiers. It stated that it needs 30 healthy and strong-willed people, and they'll earn 8 silvers per month. Lucas thinks that the pay is not bad because the average living cost in Dmitri is 5 silvers, but he hesitates to apply because the soldiers are meant from Roman and not the family. Out of nowhere, the guy next to him suddenly speaks up, telling him he doesn't have to apply since many people already have. Lucas then reassures him by explaining that he wants a higher salary to pledge his loyalty to anyone. Then he suddenly realized he misunderstood the questions and asked the man if hundreds of people were applying to be Roman soldiers. And when he talks about how Roman is just a stupid noble and they will suffer becoming his soldiers, people start to look his way. The man realizes he hasn't heard the news yet, so he tells Lucas that Roman defeated the Blood Fang and treats people with kindness, but Lucas doesn't believe him. He, too, is skeptical at first but changes his mind after hearing it from Kevin's father, Clark. Meanwhile, Kevin took a day off and went to a bakery to pick up bread. Roman gave him a day off that afternoon after they arrived in Dmitri. Kevin is still taken aback when Roman advises him to take 3 days off and enjoy his time with his family. The next morning, Kevin was still stunned by the fact that he could have time to rest because he used to work non-stop. When he left his room, Hans suddenly called him from the corridor. Hans rushes over to Kevin, gives him new clothes and money, and tells him that his salary will be 30 silvers from now on. All the gifts took Kevin aback, but he later smiled as he walked toward his house with a new pair of clothes and loaves of bread. The clothes felt soft against his skin, and the bread was fresh from the oven, so he knew his sister would love it. He remembers when he could only afford stale bread, and she always complained about it. But it was the only thing he could pay for because Blood Fang was still visiting them and terrorizing his family. And because of Roman, his family was finally free, so he's determined to become stronger at his side. When he arrives at the place Hans told him to go instead of his house, he is shocked at what he sees. He saw his parents happily talk to each other over tea, and his sister was playing with flowers. His sister is the first to see him and cheerfully calls him, which causes his parents to also turn his way. Kevin was still frozen in his place when his mother hugged him tightly while both his father and sister welcomed him home. When he asks his father about the new house, he says Hans came to them a few days ago and gave them a home and land, saying that was Roman's order. Kevin's eyes flood up with tears as he realizes the extent of Roman's help. He is grateful for everything that has been done. Suddenly, Clark notices the bruise on his cheek and immediately suspects Roman punched him. Kevin tries to explain that Roman is not the one who punched him, but his mother cuts him off, saying they'll always be by his side. He immediately stops her from making more assumptions and tells them the truth. And the next day, when Clark told his friends about it, nobody believed him. So, Clark tells his friends that Roman punched a knight from Barco to protect Kevin, and his friend is shocked by it. From that, the rumors about Roman started to spread, and people talked about how Clark's family got a new house and new land, and even Kevin was treated well by Roman. Then, others started talking about how much Roman had changed from a rude and inconsiderate person to a kind person who cared about his subordinates. Those talks snowballed to the conclusion that if they could gain Roman's trust, like Kevin, they'd be granted a new life. And now people were competing to be his soldiers. Lucas is shocked to hear Roman is behind the fall of Blood Fang and the incident at Barco's party. But he finds it hard to believe because 2 years ago, he saw Roman cause a big scene for losing money in the casino. He wonders what has happened in the last 2 years and is determined to see it all on his own. At night in the castle, Jonathan informs Romero about the rundowns of the trials for Roman soldiers, and he is amazed that time flew by so quickly. Then Jonathan advises Romero not to go through with Roman's proposal because having private soldiers for personal reasons could be risky. Romero cuts him off, explaining that he initially thought Roman went to Barco's party to deepen his ties with them and have a stronger position to inherit Dmitri. But in front of everyone, Roman slapped a knight of Barco and ignored that Anthony could ally himself with his second son. As he sets his drink on the table, he tells Jonathan his role as Roman's father is supporting him. Jonathan nods in response, and Romero asks how many people have applied so far. He expects at most 50 people will join, and to his surprise, 500 people are applying. All applicants, including Lucas, gather in the drill hall inside the castle the following day. Chris goes to Roman's tent and tells him the preparations are done. Most applicants stayed at the same inn the night before, and Lucas happily drank Dimitri's dark beer. But he doesn't expect this many people to apply for the position. He also notices 3 people on the corner wearing copper IDs in their belts, all Crank's mercenaries. Then there are the people who hang out in the bar and have battlefield experience. The level of the competition is higher than what Lucas has prepared for. He wonders why people with much experience and higher ranks than him apply for this job and then knocks his glass on the table since he can't find any answers. He was about to leave when he overheard someone mention Henderson, who will be a Laurence soldier, sitting at the table. Henderson tells him that he changed his mind after directly seeing what Roman did to the Blood Fang. At the plaza, he watched Roman drag the leader and bash his head open to terrorize people in Dmitri. It's like Roman has lived rent-free in his mind, and when other people start to listen, they all silently agree with him. Henderson believes Roman is a great leader capable of fighting for his people. Others were smiling because they thought Roman could give them a chance at a new life, and Lucas began to understand that these people were committed to this competition. And now Lucas gathers with other applicants in the drill hall, hearing them chattering with each other. While it's true that most people here are committed, he believes that there are a large number of people who, like himself, want to see Roman directly after hearing all of the rumors. Then Lucas finds the hall has gone quiet, and it's all because Roman has arrived with Chris and an archer. Roman was walking, and people started to bow when he passed through. Lucas bows as well, and he realizes that the rumors are true. His presence is enough to make people subconsciously make a way and bow for him. Roman kept walking and went up the platform, then informed everyone to raise their heads. He tells the applicants that he'll need 30 soldiers and warns them that he's not going to stay in one place all the time. People were taken aback when he stated that he would always go to war to obtain the highest position possible, so anyone who does not have a strong will can quit immediately. All he wants is their remorse for not being able to stand by his side when he finally rules over all, not their anger toward him for being killed in a war. Everyone is surprised by Roman's statement, and Lucas is dumbfounded at his arrogance in putting his entire family at risk for pursuing that goal. However, as he sees Roman's stoic expression, Lucas thinks that he could actually get it. Then Chris replaced him on the platform and told everyone about their first test. One by one, they'll be put in a spot where the archer will shoot them 3 times. The shot could barely miss them, but it could also be lethal. Only those who have sat through it all will pass the first test. Hearing the rules, everyone is startled. And without wasting time, Chris called the first 2 people to take the test, each standing at their assigned spot. Dirk is the first to be the target, and Morrison stands next to him. As the preparation is nearly finished, Morrison thinks that the archer must be skilled enough to do it because no one in their right mind would kill a soldier in the middle of recruiting. The archer fired his first arrow, which landed exactly next to Dirk's neck. He is still in shock when the archer prepares his next shot, while Morrison believes it's just to test their mentality. None of the shots hit him until, at that moment, the next shot hit Dirk right in his thigh. Everyone is stunned when they see it, and Dirk immediately feels an intense pain through his flesh. He collapses to the ground and screams in pain as Chris rushes up to him, asking for a medic to take care of Dirk immediately. As the medic brought Dirk with his bleeding leg through the crowd, they all started to think of the worst-case scenario. When Chris calls Morrison, he is still shaken by what he saw and wonders if Dirk would have survived if the shot had been aimed at his head. Others in the back begin having a second thought, and Chris again notices that Roman is right. So, he tells everyone scared by the arrows to quit now, and the one who can endure till the end will pass the first test. The night before the test began, Roman had already lined up 4 volunteers and told them they'd get shot with an arrow. However, the archer is an expert and won't cause them any fatal injuries, and Roman will also compensate them with a box full of gold coins. The 4 of them beam at the sight of money, And as Roman asks if they want to do it, they all simultaneously say yes. Then Chris asks Roman if this is necessary after the volunteers go. Roman adds that it was vital for him to evaluate which one is suitable to be his soldier, even if the probability of being shot by an arrow is 1 in 100, but it will be enough to scare them if that happens. So, Chris wonders what the qualifications are, and Roman only looks for people with the heart of the beast. He is puzzled, but Roman assures him that only those with the heart of a beast can be powerful in such a short time, and these are the people he believes worthy to be by his side. Now, right after Dirk got shot, around 100 people left the drill hall, and Chris was worried that, at this point, everyone would quit. But when he turns to look at Roman, he's still calm. And Roman's calmness stems from the fact that strong will and firm determination are inherent skills, much like Kevin and Chris, because only those with a beast's heart can defeat their opponents, no matter how strong they are, and Roman plans to make those people his warriors. The test continued until Henderson's turn, and he was so nervous that he almost lost his breath. While Lucas watches from the back, he is amazed that Henderson can bear it despite his body trembling. In his mind, he knows this is his only chance to show his loyalty to Roman, and as he sees the archer in front of him, he can't give up yet. The arrow shot through the board right next to his ear, and he started to have a second thought seeing the archer preparing his next shot. The following shot landed beside his left arm, making him determined to continue till the end. The final arrow was shot directly between his legs. That makes Henderson pass the test, and he is both afraid and relieved as his knees give out. Lucas smiles as he realizes how fortunate he is to have been able to endure it till the last arrow. And just like that, the first test went smoothly, and among 400 applicants still in the hall, only 120 passed the first test. Roman divides those who passed into two groups, those who passed while terrified and those who did not break a sweat or lose their cool. But they are all similar to him because they can suppress their nerves. Therefore, the next thing he needs to do is find people who will follow him without fear or ulterior motives. Roman announces there will be a second test because he only needs 30 soldiers. Whoever that might be, they all will be at the top of the food chain. Lucas is shocked by his statement as Roman slowly walks down the platform and points out a variety of wooden weapons on the side. Roman carefully took his sword and told them to pick any weapon they liked to fight him. People were murmuring about it, and Lucas didn't believe Roman wanted to fight 120 men alone. When no one steps forward, Roman tells them they'll get a much better reward if they last 1 minute in the duel. Then, someone volunteers to go first. As they stood face to face, Roman asked what's his name, and he introduced himself as Vulcan. He doesn't mind the wooden sword because among the things that bother him the most is Roman's arrogance. He might destroy Bloodfang on his own, but Roman couldn't beat him in a minute. As Chris grabs the hourglass, he tells them to get ready. Vulcan determines to let Roman know what he's made of so he'll fight him with all his might. After Chris turns the hourglass, he doesn't waste any time to deliver his first strike. Swinging his sword with incredible speed, he found himself outpaced by Roman, who calmly sidestepped, leaving Vulcan in disbelief. Then Roman put his leg in front of his right foot and pushed him off his balance until he fell to the ground. Everything is moving so fast that Vulcan doesn't have time to understand what has happened. And the next thing he knows, Roman's blade is around his neck. Lucas is amazed by how quickly and lightly Roman moves to evade Vulcan's attack, and as he looks at Roman, he knows the test is just getting more difficult. Because the moment Vulcan lost to Roman, everyone became aware of his strength. But when the fight continues, people fighting Roman will use all of their strength. They expect Roman to lose his stamina. An hour later, Roman defeated another candidate, making half the candidates lose, yet Roman showed no signs of being tired. As Roman orders the next people to come forward, H. Netterson finally realizes what he meant in his speech. He's a predator who doesn't live by any rules. Some people in the hall are nervous seeing how easily Roman beat half of them in less than a minute, but others are confident they made the right choice by applying to be Roman soldiers. Even with his current title as the moron of Dimitri, Roman has proved himself to be more than that, and this is their only chance to serve him. They don't know how to fight a monster like Roman, and then he asserts that if no one comes forward, everyone else will fail. They all became anxious and began to tell each other to come forth. So, Lucas volunteers to come forward with his wooden sword and introduces himself as the 61 applicants. As he looks at Roman, no other word can describe him but a monster. And it's not just from his incredible martial arts but also how he exerts dominance in the hall. Lucas is confident that Roman will continue rising through the ranks until he rules the entire continent. He fights with a sword in his right hand and a knife in his left, thinking that if he wins, he can prove what Roman says is true. Chris turns the hourglass and begins the fight. Lucas doesn't waste any time running toward Roman with both of his weapons, and Chris is amazed by his determination to land the first strike, and his strategy to swing his sword to the head while aiming the dagger at Roman's heart. It was all a calculated move, but Roman stepped back to avoid Lucas' knife while still parrying his sword. He watches everything Roman does and quickly decides to launch another strike. He hurled his dagger toward Roman's chest, yet Roman skillfully diverted it away before it neared him. Lucas cleverly employed his dagger as a diversion, anticipating Roman's reaction, and swiftly attacked with his sword. This maneuver caught Roman off guard, although he managed to mount a counterattack nonetheless. When Roman strikes back, Lucas' defense is not enough to save him from being thrown a few steps back. And because of that, Lucas doesn't think this is enough, and there should be an opening as long as he attacks her opponent relentlessly. But Roman is really like an impenetrable fortress. Even so, Lucas knows he can't stop here because the fight will end soon after he feels doubt. For him to survive for a minute, he has to keep attacking him, so Lucas charges ahead, determined to win. Roman, who saw Lucas' ability, is a little impressed. His decision wasn't right on the battlefield, but it was right in a duel. He commends him on his sense of instinct, but he's not going to let Lucas endure for just 1 minute. As Roman steps forward to defend himself against Lucas' attack, he does this only for one reason, and this 1 minute is a wall that shows the strength of the master they will serve. Lucas swings his knife right at Roman's neck, but Roman is quick to evade it, and he counters it by swinging his sword right at Lucas' neck. The purpose of this test is to engrave that on their brains through their first encounter, and now it's time for Roman to end it here. Roman began to speed up his attacks, causing Lucas to be pushed back because he couldn't track his movement. And at that moment, Lucas remembered himself in the past. A B-rank mercenaries, that's the limit of his effort. Ordinary people like him can reach B rank as long as they try hard by risking their lives. But as long as they can't use mana, they will never be allowed to enter the realm of a rank. A rank must have enough power to surpass anyone, and the basic requirement to achieve that is to awaken mana. Because of that, Lucas reached his limit. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't pass through the B rank. And even so, he continued to survive on the battlefield, where people died again and again, which made him realize he had to do everything to survive. As Lucas reaches for something in his pocket, he knows he must rely on all means necessary. He throws a bag of sand right at Roman's face, knowing that the rule is to endure 1 minute in the duel. Meanwhile, Chris is shocked that Lucas had played dirty in the fight. After Roman was hit, Lucas immediately moved to counterattack. But when he saw Roman's eyes unblinking even after being sprayed by sand, he laughed, realizing there was no chance for him to win, and Lucas dropped his weapon. In Roman's previous life, before he learned any martial arts, he was taught to keep his eyes open no matter his situation, because blinking in a vital situation can mean the difference between winning and losing. That is why, in addition to his breathing method, he must always have his eyes open. When the trainer came at him with a knife, he quickly aimed it at his eyes and tried his hardest to keep them open. And now sand being thrown at his face is nothing compared to what he endured in his past life. After Lucas surrendered, Chris gave Roman water to clean his face while he stood in the arena. Lucas thought to himself that he would not have used sand if he had known how it would end up. He did everything he could to survive for 1 minute and pass the test, but the outcome was awful. Roman must be very disappointed in him, or maybe he didn't expect anything from the beginning, but he might be punished for what he did. But unexpectedly, Roman told the next participant to come forward, which surprised Lucas and the other participants. The other participant said he didn't even get angry or ask why the man was using dirty means. On Roman's side, he had seen Lucas' plan coming as soon as he saw his hand pick up the pouch at his side when retreating to avoid the attack. But he let him do that to see what he's capable of. The hell Lucas had already gone through was nothing compared to the blood he witnessed as Younghyuk. Roman once again asks if there are no more people to come forward and fight him. And just like that, the test resumed, and Chris noticed that Lucas had set the example. All the participants relied on any means to survive for 1 minute. Lucas, who sees that dirty means are not a requirement to be disqualified, makes Roman show no mercy when they cross that line, because he just saw Roman kick someone's face mercilessly. If he hadn't given up, his fate would have been like that person's. After all that, there is one situation that's confusing him because of how absurd it is. It's the 100th fight, and the test has been running for 2 hours. But Roman didn't sweat a drop, and his breathing remained steady. On Roman's side, he was taught that on the verge of death, no enemy would spare him just because of exhaustion. It will only slow down his movements when his breathing is unstable. That's why there is no choice but to master how to fight. The mana gained from the repetition of breathing in and out flows throughout the body to recover from the fatigue accumulated in his body. Practicing this ideal treatment on his body and reinforcing it by skeletal metamorphosis will maintain his body at an optimal state. Roman easily counters his opponent's attack with one strike. Then he rushes forward, his sword poised to strike, recalling the times when he fought for 3 days and 3 nights without rest when conquering Muram. This type of mild combat would not diminish his energy. After a while, Chris tells all the assembled participants that none of them had succeeded in the second test. However, this does not imply that everyone who applied failed, because 30 of the 120 participants below will be chosen and announced later. He then dismisses them. The time changed to night, and Roman gave the list of participants who passed. From now on, Chris will be in charge of these 30 people. After seeing the list of names of the participants who passed, Chris notices people like Vulcan, the one who challenged Roman first. He must have judged by his courage, and Henderson is nothing special. But maybe Roman saw something in him. Other than them, the others can still be understood. Then Chris asked if Lucas had also passed, and Roman confirmed it. Then Roman asks if there is a problem, and Chris admits that Lucas is quite talented as a B-level mercenary. However, not only did he use dirty tricks in the dueling test, but he decided to give up without fighting to the end. He immediately gave up when he realized his defeat. Chris believes people like him will only harm them on the battlefield. Lucas is a mercenary who wouldn't hesitate to abandon his comrades to survive, and Chris simply couldn't take responsibility for soldiers like him. And before he could finish his sentence, Roman interrupted and said that's why he chose him. Just like Chris said, Lucas is a coward who doesn't even have honor. But in a situation where not everyone thinks of fighting back in a dirty way, he thinks and acts most realistically. When Roman asks how he knows Lucas will abandon his fellow soldiers in combat, he recalls Captain Jonathan's words that people who survive on the battlefield are not knights who can use auras, but people who face and act according to the situation. Jonathan asks him to keep this in mind, and Chris realizes that Lucas's decision is realistic. He was short-sighted again this time. Then Chris asked Roman about something he still needed help understanding. There are still 5 months left until he leaves for the battlefield, and it's not like the nobles will be dragged to the front lines just because of the military service. So what's his reason for gathering soldiers this early? And Roman expected that there would be a very big announcement soon. The Barco family's messenger made an official announcement. They had been waiting for Laurence to decide and believed in past promises. However, because Laurence broke a promise and dishonored them as nobles, the Barco family decided to take action after waiting patiently. The Laurence family didn't repay the debt from their ancestors and refused to give back the land they used as collateral. So, they will tell the people of the Cairo kingdom that if Laurence doesn't repay the debt or return the land within a week, the Barco family, with the central government's permission, will start a territorial war against the Laurence family. While Chris and Roman were talking, Chris, who knew that Laurence and Barco were going to war as announced, was surprised that Roman would be prepared to interfere in Barco's war against Laurence. Meanwhile, in Laurence, Flora would have nightmares every night, feeling guilty that her actions had led to the annulment of her engagement with Roman. She woke up panting in the middle of the night and got a constant headache from it. In the morning, 2 servants talk about Flora, who has been confined to her room since returning from Dimitri's territory. One of them heard that the engagement was cancelled because of Flora's mistake. The other wonders what she did to have Roman reject her initially and worries for their safety because the fight with Barco is approaching. Inside Flora's, she thought she was a smart person. She finished the advanced academy courses at the academy with good grades. From the warm smile his father always showed her, she thought she had already done good. But in reality, she was nothing without her family, nothing more than a flower in a greenhouse. And the irony of it all is that she's the actual idiot, not Roman. Now, she has lost her confidence to meet his father. Her mind began to wonder about what Roman would do in this situation because Roman is the complete opposite of her. He destroyed Bloodfang with his strength and took that courageous action for the sake of his family. She wonders why Roman became such a strong man and did all that on his own, which is admirable. That made her jealous because Roman could solve his problem without relying on others. Outside her room, the servant announced that the food was ready, but there was no answer from Flora. They thought Flora wouldn't answer them. But unexpectedly, Flora came out of her room and told them she was going to the library. After coming to the library, Flora thinks about how her father is doing his best to gather help from other families, but she's sure none of them will help in this situation. Just like Roman destroyed Bloodfang, she has to find a way to get out of this problem by herself. In the Viscount's room, his assistant informs him that the Mardell and Vastra family rejected their offer. He then told him that, no matter how he looks at it, gathering help from nearby areas is impossible due to Barco's pressure. There are rumors that Barco will antagonize everyone in the Northeast who interferes in this matter. In the library, where Flora spent hours reading books, she thought to herself, with 1 week till the war, there is only one way for Laurence to handle this problem. Back in Flora's father's room, he's cursing those families that wouldn't lift a finger to help Laurence and treat them like they didn't exist despite their good relationship up until the conflict starts. So, he asked if there had been any news from Gold Bank, and his assistant said they would investigate the territory guarantee issue. But it looked like their investigation wouldn't be completed in 1 week, and judging by the amount of money they gave to Barco, he's sure they thought it was more profitable to side with Barco. Now, he's really on rock bottom with no plausible solution. Everyone in the room looks at him with grim looks on their face. Then, one of the higher-ups says maybe it's better to just give up because any help from neighboring territories has already been blocked because of Barco, and the difference in troop numbers is also really obvious. If they surrender, they could give them what they want while protecting their clueless soldiers, as well as preserving as much of their land as possible rather than having it all taken away. When Flora's father says that the high-ranking officer's words are true, just as he is about to continue, a servant outside tells him that Flora wants to see him before she barges into the room. Then, she said that she had something to tell him. Moving to where Roman is talking to his father, he intends to intervene in Laurence's war against Barco on behalf of himself. Then, his father asked Roman if he understood the consequences of what he said, to which Roman replied that he did. Then, Romero angrily continues by saying that despite knowing the consequences, he still wants to do it. Added to the fact that he had already cancelled his engagement to Flora, Romero doesn't see any reason for them to interfere in this matter. Because if Dmitri interferes, all the nobles in the Northeast will cut off their relations, and the worst-case scenario would be the central government sending troops to conquer Dmitri. Roman explains that he didn't interfere in this war for having a change of heart but because he received threats from Barco's eldest son, and the reason behind it was because his marriage to Flora would hinder their plans. However, Roman was unable to give evidence to back up the events of that day. Although Barco sees them as lower class, people claim Dmitri is the strongest family in the Northeast. Then, he claims that his father has done nothing with the authority and fortune he has because he is satisfied with his current condition. But Roman craves authority, and he will not stand by while Dmitri's name is sullied, whether by Barco or anyone else. And just like Barco, who declared war by making up excuses, Roman will do the same because excuses are just child's play for those with power. Later, Roman said in his heart that it doesn't matter if this is a new life, his identity as Baek Jonghyuk has not changed. He thrives to be at the top of the food chain. Then, Roman spoke back to his father, saying he was not asking him to lend the power of family because he would interfere in this war only as Roman Dmitri. He only asks Romero to keep an eye on him, and the road he chooses will be the life he follows from now on. After hearing Roman's words, Romero remembered himself talking to his wife that no matter how rich or even when he becomes a lord, the fact that he's a commoner does not change. His wife asked if anything had happened among the other nobles when he went to the capital, and Romero replied that the others always looked down on him because he was a commoner. Then, his wife asked again if Romero wanted to change that, to which Romero replied that he was satisfied with his current life and only hoped for his children to be different and aim for greater things. Back to his conversation with Roman, Romero, who was surprised after hearing Roman's words, knew those were not the eyes of someone who could be persuaded. And this is what he has been dreaming of, where his troublesome son has grown up without him even realizing it. Then, Romero replies, saying to do as he likes and just tell him when he needs help, because he is his father, and no matter what he does, he will always support him. Some time passed, and Roman went to the Dmitri blacksmith's area, and was amazed that the place was as big as what people had said. There are 30 workshops in this blacksmith area where all the ironworkers can work together. His doubts about how Dmitri would maintain such wealth disappeared after seeing all this, and the iron mine behind the territory was already the largest deposit in the entire kingdom. Adding the fact that Dmitri's ironworkers have incredible forging skills, they could sell iron from the mine at a high price. For that reason, the nobles from the northeast and the Cairo kingdom couldn't risk antagonizing Dmitri. It wasn't just about fearing Dmitri's wealth, but also because not receiving iron weapons from them would pose a significant issue in the kingdom. That's why Roman decided to come here, because Dmitri is renowned as a skilled blacksmith, and Roman aims to uphold that reputation. When Roman spoke with his father earlier, he stated that he intended to handle the situation with his own might. but he requires his help to equip his warriors. Then, Romero told Roman to meet Master Hendrik, back when he used to handle all the matters in the workshop, and now that he has a noble title, he has become their family's master in leading all weaponry manufacturing. However, Roman must remember that the pride of Dimitri's forgers is very high, and they are not people who will swear loyalty to him just because he was born a Dimitri. Only those who can understand the quality of iron and have the ability to handle it can receive the forger's trust. And true to his words, when Roman enters the street, the people who were there are annoyed after seeing Roman's arrival. Roman, who saw that, understood that his father was telling the truth, and after Roman's previous behavior, it's not surprising to see them behaving like this. When he enters the workshop, Romero points to a man sneering at him for coming to the shop. He realizes that the person is Master Hendrik. Roman calmly says that his father has sent a letter about the reason he came here. Then, Master Hendrik says that Roman needs equipment for 30 people, and he sarcastically says Roman came just to steal things because he ran out of money to get entertainment. He points at the pile of body armor and swords and tells Roman to take it. That makes Roman wonder if that's truly the best work from Dimitri. Master Hendrik angrily replies if he's not satisfied with it, he could just leave here. Then, Roman grabs a sword and says that Dimitri's reputation for the best weaponry was just a hoax. So he asks again if this is truly his best work, and Master Hendrik says Dimitri's armor holds the pride of having the best quality in Cairo. But it is ridiculous for a man like Roman, who has never even dropped sweat in front of a scorching fire, to criticize Dimitri's weaponry. Were it not for Romero's request, he would not have given him a single weapon and angrily pointed his finger at Roman, saying that he's worthless trash. Roman, who is used to being thought of as useless by others, argues that he understands the frustration. Then he notes that the sword was crafted with uneven force until it rapidly altered its color in sunlight due to the inexperienced and poor metal forging skills of the smith. Therefore, this sword cannot be considered Dimitri's armor, and because he could have guessed this truth, this sword is as trash. Roman explains that if any of his men were unable to efficiently fight the enemy with this sword, the dull blade wouldn't go through the body properly, and if the sword got stuck in the enemy's muscles, the warrior who couldn't retrieve it would be killed. Then he asks Hendrik what kind of injustice he thinks this is when his soldiers tried their best to survive. But he had no choice but to die because his master armed him with trash. And before Hendrik could answer, Roman asks what he thinks is the reason for a warrior to wear armor. If it can protect the body from enemy attacks even once, then the weight of the armor can still be taken into account. However, the warrior who wore the chain armor he gave him died because he was betrayed by the armor he trusted. Hendrik angrily asked what Roman was talking about, and Roman spoke back, saying, didn't he understand what he had said? Roman truly understands his thoughts and feelings. When he stabs the armor with the broken sword, it goes through, and Roman thinks that he has crossed the line because his soldiers would have entrusted their lives to trash without knowing the truth. This matter isn't about retaliation for his personal vendetta against Roman. It's a matter that puts the lives of 30 people at stake. Master Hendrik states that he didn't mean to, while Roman replies that the reason doesn't matter since the weapon's purpose is clear, and he asks for quality gear on behalf of his father, but Hendrik gives him defective equipment instead. Then Roman said to Hendrik that he could consider this as insubordination to his father. Roman knows Hendrik just doesn't want to give him anything good, but people's life is at stake, so he asks the same thing again. To which Hendrik immediately says that it was not an act of insubordination, so Roman asks him to explain his actions. Other blacksmiths who hear the commotion between Roman and Hendrik come because they can't stand to see an idiot like Roman insulting Hendrik. Then, one of them notices Roman holding a sword and assumes the worst, while Roman calmly watches these people making accusations about him. Suddenly, Hendrik told them to stop and apologize because the commotion was his fault. He also remembers when he was young, he was still learning to forge from his teacher and got a scolding because he was lazy when he could not complete the assigned task correctly. Plus, at that time, he made a sword without knowing anything. That's why he got into trouble. And his teacher told him to throw away the sword. The next day, he is still upset about it as he cuts wood and wonders when he'll become a blacksmith. Then he overheard a conversation between a buyer and his teacher, who wanted to buy a sword but didn't have enough money. Therefore, his teacher told the buyer to leave. Hendrik, filled with regret, followed the buyer and gifted him the sword he had made. The buyer was overjoyed and expressed gratitude to Hendrik for the free sword. Some time passed, and the unexpected happened. The person who received the weapon from Hendrik was killed, and he was throwing up because he couldn't bear the sight. As he was panting, he heard that the man had lost his life on merchant escort duty when his sword was broken while fighting bandits. And this is why soldiers need good weapons. All of that conversation weighing on Hendrik's shoulder because he's the reason the man had died. From that day, Hendrik promised to always make good weapons. Back to the situation where Roman is asking for equipment for his men. Hendrik can't believe how pathetic he is trying to repeat what happened that time just because he didn't like Roman. And then, Hendrik says that he will pay for his actions, and he's surprised when Roman says that he won't prolong this matter. As he throws the sword, he says that Hendrik is the best blacksmith in Dimitri, and he understands that he didn't intend to disobey his father on purpose, and his hate toward him triggered his actions. So, Roman asks for both of them to forget about each other's mistakes, because all he wants is for his troops to have armor and weapons that will keep them safe. Hendrik doesn't understand how someone can change so much since Roman isn't the same person he knew before. Then, Hendrik apologizes again and swears that this won't happen again. And as an apology, the weapons and armor for his soldiers will be made to the highest quality that Dimitri is proud of, and Roman smiles at that. On that same day, Hendrik and his men were making the equipment for Roman, and one of them who spoke to Roman told him that he had stolen Hendrik's sword in the past. The man explains that about 3 years ago, he really needed money because Romero cut off his allowance. So he broke into the workshop and stole Hendrik's sword, then sold it for a very low price to a street vendor, without knowing that the sword he stole at that time was Hendrik's masterpiece. It was a masterpiece that took him 6 months to design and an additional 3 months to perfect until he didn't come out of the workshop at all, and for it to be sold at such a low price was unbearable. After hearing those words, Roman left the workshop, and at the same time, Hendrik followed and said he hadn't really forgiven him for that incident. He only accepts his request because it was his fault, but he still can't accept that the eldest son of the Dimitri family is oblivious to the fact that Dimitri's basic pillar is the workshop. If there comes a time when he makes a sword with his 2 hands, maybe he will see Roman in a different light, and he smiles and replies it won't be long. Then Roman goes to the workshop where he trains and has the first transformation. This place has been cleaned according to his orders, and all the equipment is also ready. When he was in Murom, he decided to forge his own sword when he was 18 years old because, at that time, the heir of the demonic cult had not been decided, and the relationship between his brothers was completely chaotic. He has to sleep with his eyes open to overcome an assassination attempt, and then his 11th brother, Baek Changhyun, ambushes him with the intention of killing. It was really a fierce fight, but his beloved sword shattered because it couldn't withstand Changhyun's attack. His brother ran toward him, ready to kill, and he could survive with what was left of his sword. As he mangled his brother's face, he needed a sword that would never break in battle and could bring out his full potential. After that, he visited a blacksmith and learned how to forge swords from them. And before the battle, he always forged a sword suitable for his current strength and power. Until time passed and he had fought hundreds of thousands of times. His sword continued to change with the times, and his 39th sword became known as the Heavenly Demon Sword, a treasure that couldn't even be valued. Now, as he prepared to hammer a heated plate of iron for the upcoming war, it was time to forge a sword suitable for his new self. He keeps hammering the metal with the same amount of rhythm and pressure, repeating it over and over until he enters a trance where he is solely focused on his sword. Looking at the glowing metal, he thinks about his past life when he finally became the leader of a world where only the strongest will survive. He never thought of it as bad, so he decides to keep living his truth, and with this new world that he still doesn't understand how powerful the forces are, he needs to keep training to be stronger than his current self to fight those that claim to be the strongest in the continent. He can't afford to lose, and as he sets his mind on it, he stops hammering the metal and breathes in the fire, until he's engulfed with fire. Then he starts to hammer his sword again. It's a godly inferno art that was used by the flame demon. It could quickly accumulate mana with the power of heat, and it's the best technique to use with his current strength. Although he knows that practicing this martial art may cause damage to his lungs and internal organs, he wants powers to overcome any obstacles. Meanwhile, after Flora barges into his father's meeting, she says that their situation is not ideal, and they don't stand a chance to fight with their current military strength, and surrendering is not a choice they could afford. Her father hits the table as he stands and says that's their only choice to save their soldier's life. So Flora explains that not only the Barco will benefit from this war, while Gold Bank is lending Barco money, in order to get a reward that will benefit both parties, they will divide their territory after controlling Laurence. His father then asks what they should do, and Flora answers by saying the only way they could survive is by playing defense. After hearing his daughter's words, Flora's father thinks Flora is a child with a good grasp of the situation, and she would tell them an extraordinary way to handle it. But what she said made sense. Flora isn't only suggesting they close their castle gates, she also says to let go of the harvest this year and set the fields on fire, then stock as many supplies as they can until winter comes. Her father is taken aback by her notion, and Flora explains that Barco only has their money, so she uses it as a weapon in the hope that if they can extend the fight, the interest will continue to rise. She knows that the gold bank is a powerhouse on its own, and they will start pressuring Barco using the interest if the war is taking too long. Then she explains that any forces can't pressure the gold bank, and they could hire mercenaries at any time. When the war becomes disadvantageous, they'll dry up on their own, and after hearing this, the Viscount is surprised that Flora considered it this much. Everyone starts to truly consider her options while her father thinks that after the disengagement with Roman, he begins to wonder if he raised her to be immature, but this proves to him that she's not like that. He stands and tells everyone to start planning their defense strategy. All of them listen closely to him when he says that they'll keep defending themselves to keep the lineage of Laurence alive. Flora finally starts to grow, and it's all because of Roman. At the same time, Roman finally finished hammering his sword, and he put it in water to cool it down. As he brings the sword outside, he believes no matter what the situation, a first is always special. When he puts the sword against the sun, the middle of the blade glows orange, and he thinks to himself that this sword is perfect for his current condition. And he smiles as he names his sword like the world he's living in, Salamander. A few days passed, and it was time for the war between Barco and Laurence to begin. A messenger sent by the Barco family approached the Castile Laurence gate. The day of war comes, and the messenger of Fiscan Barco states that he will give Laurence 3 choices. First is to leave the castle to surrender because it's the only way to have their lives spared. The second choice is to fight an all-out war against them, and they'll fight fairly in an open field with a jury from the central government watching. Then he said to the Viscount that he could also choose a fight between 2 warriors. The way of fighting can be as he wishes because they intend to follow his decision. Flora's father says they don't believe Barco's claims in this declaration of war are justified. The dossier that states their ancestral debt is artificial, and he has no intention of sacrificing the lives of the Laurence people. Before he could finish his statement, the messenger of the Barco family interrupted and said their third option was to throw away his pride as a member of a noble family by putting up a desperate defense inside the castle. From now on, the Barco family will honor his decision and will make him pay for his decision with his lives in this siege. He soon left after conveying the message. The Laurence soldiers who heard that trembled with fear, while the Viscount thinks that after seeing how prepared the Barcos are, he knew the war had begun. The archers from Laurence began shooting arrows to attack the incoming Barco soldiers. Meanwhile, the Lord of Barco throws his glass in anger when he hears what the Viscount has said. They have prepared 3 times as many troops as Laurence, and the captain thinks this war will be over in a matter of hours, but the situation is different than he expected. He then explains that Laurence has already completed their preparations for this battle because they set up a large moat to prevent their troops from approaching the wall. Also, judging from the number of arrows they shot from the beginning of the war, it seems like they have secured enough supplies, and it angers the Lord even more. He wonders what exactly happened in the past week because it's not like Laurence to choose defense so desperately. According to his calculations, they should have surrendered in order to retain as much territory as possible. But in reality, they were preparing to perish by locking the castle gates. Then, his captain asks what they should do, and he says to prepare their ultimate weapon. The captain is surprised that he would actually use it, while the Lord believes that Viscount Laurence is not a determined person. He practically sold his daughter to Dimitri's family because he couldn't withstand Barco's pressure, and he smiled, knowing that he was a person who would tremble in fear like a coward when times of crisis came. Meanwhile, in Laurence's castle, the Viscount tells his soldiers to be focused and prepare for Barco's next attack. Then, he sees Flora's approach and says she is right. The Barco is already restless to the point of pulling back their troops, and he wonders how she came to this plan. Flora realizes that she has to become stronger rather than just waiting for the problem to be solved. She wants to solve it by herself, and that is the path of life she wants to take from now on. Her father is moved by her decision and apologizes for forcing her to marry Roman. At the time, he thought it was the only way to save their family, but from now on, no matter what the situation is like, he's sure that Flora will make the right decision. Flora is happy to hear it until a tremendous boom followed by an explosion on the castle's walls startles both her and her father. It left a massive hole in the wall, and Flora, who saw the castle destroyed, wonders what caused it. Then, from afar, Laurence notices that Barco has a huge magical cataphil known as Flare. Then they begin to feel panic and can't believe that Barco has used the weapon. Flora couldn't do it as well. Flare is a magic weapon, the firing of which costs dozens of gold. Therefore, it was considered a strategic weapon. It must not be used without the approval of the central government, no matter how rich a person is. Putting aside the money that the Barcos had borrowed, it is not unexpected that Barco has the connections and wealth to borrow the Flare. And now she's faced with two dreading options: fighting the weapon with the same magic level or opening the gates and destroying it by hand. These are only two ways to contain the Flare, and both options are impossible. She can't give up like this. When Flora was feeling down, one of her servants told her that there was a magic call. Flora wondered who, and the servant said that it was from Roman, and he said that he had a way to help. After hearing that, Flora immediately contacted Roman. Flora immediately asks Roman how to save Laurence from danger. Roman explains that he's not doing this for the sake of Laurence, but because of personal revenge. And if Laurence follows his plan, then he'll speed up his revenge time and destroy Barco for her. Flora asked what role they should play in his plan, and Roman answered by saying that if Laurence sets the stage for them by making the first sacrifice, then he'll help them in the name of Roman Dimitri. She is stunned hearing it and wonders that Roman must have offered this because he already knew their situation, and they had no other choice. Then, Flora promises to do anything he wants as long as she can protect her family. Roman says he needs one additional thing, and that is to give him a reason to interfere in this war. Since their engagement is off, he needs a reason to act, so Flora asks what reason she should say, and Roman mentions Anthony, and tells her to claim that Anthony has violated her. Flora's surprise and dread wash over her. Even when nothing happens between her and Anthony, Roman tells her to lie, which could cause her value in the noble families to fall to the ground, and her title will be lost. Then Roman adds that if she throws aside everything that has been bestowed upon her as a noble princess, he will obtain the largest clause that will solve Laurence's problem. That's the only legal way for him to interfere in the war since they had no relationship, and Flora is trembling at the thought of what's to come. Seeing how scared she was, Roman continued his words by saying that if the harassment happened before the engagement was cancelled, it would establish her relationship with him, and he would never forgive anyone who hurt his allies. Flora thought hard while the Flare relentlessly firing at the castle, killing many soldiers until the walls finally collapsed. Trembling and determined, Flora finally says that she will fulfill all the conditions Roman gives and begs Roman to destroy everyone from the Barco family. Back to the battle at Laurence Castle. Barco's soldiers began to break through and approach the wall, and Flora's father ordered his soldiers to defend the fort's defenses. While he was instructing his soldiers, one of Barco's soldiers managed to climb the fort and directly attacked him. Flora's father, who realizes it too late, couldn't do anything when the attack from Barco's soldiers was directed at him. But unexpectedly, at the same time, Flora also shoots her arrow to save him, and the soldier falls from the castle. He's surprised to see his daughter, and Flora tells his father to open the castle gate to face Barco directly. Her father, who was surprised, asked Flora why they opened the castle gate. Flora explained that Roman promised to help them as long as they distracted their eyes by passing through the gate, and only then would Roman lead his troops to destroy the Flare. His father wonders why Roman wants to help them, and Flora says she doesn't have time to explain the details, but she knows that Roman is a man of his word. After Roman finishes the magic call with Flora, Chris asks if they are going to attack directly, to which Roman replies no. Chris spoke back, saying that Laurence might lose if they delayed any longer because Flare is a powerful weapon that can destroy castle walls. If he really intends to disrupt Barco's plans by helping Laurence, they should attack their rear now. From the back, Laurence's castle is filled with fires, and Roman asks why he would speed up his plan because Laurence is not important to him. Chris is shocked hearing it, and Roman explains that rather than caring about the deaths of hundreds of people they don't know, making sure none of his subordinates die is the most important thing to him. It's inevitable for Laurence to lose many people from this war because of their incompetent leader. And unlike them, Roman has no intention of forcing the people who swore loyalty to him to become a futile sacrifice. Chris echoed Roman's words even when he was still shocked by it. At the battlefield, Flora's father ordered the gate to be opened and ordered his soldiers to attack Barco's soldiers. He orders them to charge forward, and quickly, his soldiers march outside the gates. They all point their spear at Barco's soldiers, and one of the mercenaries among the soldiers who saw that mocks them, and he immediately cut down Lawrence's soldiers. It turns out that he was one of the Burge mercenaries hired by the Barco family, and Lawrence's soldiers, who saw their friends being killed so easily by the mercenaries, began to tremble with fear. Because of this, they began to run back to the castle entrance, and Flora, who saw that, told them to endure to the end. If they can't provide bait properly, Roman won't be helping them. Meanwhile, in the back, the Lord notices the sound of horses approaching, and when he turns, he sees Roman approaching with his soldiers. On the way to the battlefield, Roman thinks that his soldiers risk their lives earlier than planned. Chris and Kevin's faces show doubt and anxiety. As he looks back at them, he promises them the life of a predator, but in the end, their safety will be determined by their own fighting spirit and strength. As they moved slowly toward the back of the Barco camp, Roman took his sword out of its sheath. Some time ago, before leaving for the battlefield, Roman addressed his soldiers by saying their main objective was to attack the rear of the Barco to destroy their strategic weapons. He knows Lawrence won't be able to fulfill their role as decoys properly, and he doubts their strength in this operation. Roman will lead the front line, slaughtering any enemies that get in the way, and their job is to kill the remaining enemies. However, their focus has to be the flare. Meanwhile, the Lord of Barco, with some of his troops, looks at Roman approaching, doubting he could beat them with such a small army, so he tells his soldiers to take care of them. The Barco warriors who got the order to fight Roman's troops are already preparing to confront him, and Roman flinches or slows down when dozens of spears aim at him. He raises his sword high and immediately breaks through the defense of the Barco warriors by cutting them down quickly. When his horse got hit, he quickly jumped from the back. He was unfazed by the large soldiers in front of him because back in Murim, the heavenly demon, always standing at the forefront of demonic cults because he was invincible, and facing him head-on, was just digging his own grave. Roman kills multiple soldiers in one swing, and he coldly watches them fall to the ground while their blood spatters at him. Even then, many were curious about his motivations for taking on the most dangerous duty as a heavenly demon. And the answer was the same: the strongest figure had to demoralize the enemy from the front lines. And he's right, soldiers in the back, who watched what he did trembling with fear. Knowing they're too scared to move forward, he threatens to attack first, and Kevin grits his teeth hearing it. Kevin wants to be strong like Roman, so he buries his fear deeply and shouts to follow Roman to lift his comrades' spirits. Chris, who heard Kevin's shout, is shocked, and his other comrades are no exception. They began to slaughter the Barco troops who blocked them, leaving a trail of blood in their wake. One of the Barco soldiers managed to thrust his spear into Kevin's horse, which made Kevin angry and eager to follow Roman. He immediately jumps from his horse and stabs the Barco soldier to death, pulling down his knife as he falls to the ground. And at the same time, Chris ignites his mana, and he quickly cuts down the Barco soldiers who are blocking him. The soldiers who blocked Roman say that they had to stop Roman's movement, but no one could stop Roman as he continued to kill the Barco troops. No one matched his speed, and they ended up getting killed. Roman kept his focus on the flare gun right in front of him, knowing that none of these soldiers had anything compared to him. Burge, who sees what's happening from the side, is surprised by Roman, and he begins to worry because the reward is too big and his mercenary business is in jeopardy, so he decides to face Roman. Then, he grabbed his sword and moved as fast as lightning to confront Roman. Roman immediately recognizes Burge when he jumps in front of him, and knowing that Burge is a class of mercenary who knows how to control the aura, it doesn't stop him from moving forward. The blades of their swords collided, and Burge attempted to fight off Roman's strength. However, as the blades collided, he saw that there was a significant strength gap between them. As a consequence of this, the Burge was cornered, and Roman eventually cut his head from his body. The length of time the A-class mercenaries fought against Roman was only 5 seconds. The subordinates who saw their leader die by him were shocked and frightened, but it was the opposite of Roman's troops, who were happy to see their master succeed. The Lord of Barco, who sees it, is upset while shouting at his soldiers to kill Roman and his subordinates, who tried to calm him down because he had to go to a safe place first since fighting Roman is not an option anymore. Roman finally turned his gaze to the flare. The power of magic that was used within it did not exist in the Murim world in his past life. He walks towards the weapon and activates his technique, and immediately, his body is covered with dark energy. It was called the Heavenly Sword technique in the first form. Roman channels his power to his sword and swings it to the flare. and instantly, the weapon was split into two with one slash. The Lord and his men were shocked to see what was happening in front of them. The flare becomes a pile of wood in Roman's hand, and then he shouts, declaring he has destroyed Barco's strategic weapon. At the same time, Flora, who saw it, is crying tears of joy. She can't believe Roman actually won the war. With flare destroyed, Barco lost their main weapon and had no choice but to retreat. In this battle, Chris used the aura in a different way than before. He had done his best to condense the aura as much as possible, just like Roman had done. And as a result, not much of his mana was drained. Even in this fierce battle, he is ridiculed by those around him for following Roman. But Chris is growing into a better soldier. Chris is smiling, knowing that Roman is right from the beginning and that the methods he's been teaching are the right ones. When he looks at his friend, he's surprised to see them panting and falling to the ground due to exhaustion. It sounds like they had struggles keeping up with Roman and were very tired. But none of the 30 soldiers were left behind. And no one was badly hurt, which makes him smile even bigger. He finally understands why Roman chose them, and the only reason they managed to survive was Roman. Then Roman turns back and praises his soldiers for being able to survive and says that their role is over. After repelling Barco's army and winning the battle, Roman and his soldiers entered Laurence's territory. After entering, Roman is hailed by the people of Laurence as they enter through the gate. When Flora's father met Roman, he knew he wasn't an ordinary person. But he couldn't believe Roman was able to destroy that flare. Dimitri gave birth to a tiger, and if nothing goes wrong, that tiger will become his son-in-law. It's really unfortunate, but that's already in the past, and when Roman is in front of him, he gladly welcomes him. Roman, who hears it, smiles, then shakes his hand. Some time passed, and Roman was going to attend Viscount Laurence when Flora approached. She apologizes because they couldn't fulfill their role as bait properly, but he still helped them, and she's grateful for it. Roman says he only did his part, and Laurence did what he had expected. And Flora still wants to show her gratitude, so she'll make sure Roman gets what he wants in the meeting. Roman, who heard that, smiles, saying he won't refuse such a favor, and asks her to go into the room. After entering the room, Roman listened to what the Laurence officials had to say. One of them proposes a peace treaty, and everyone agrees that they should look forward and forget about the past. After hearing their conversation, Roman thinks that Laurence is too soft, and then he hears Flora's father agreeing with their opinion. And before he could finish, Roman interrupted him. Everyone grew silent and let Roman speak. He gets up from his chair and says that Barco is under financial pressure. They have to beat Laurence in order to pay back the big loans they took out. Even if Flare is gone, nothing will change because the Barco will not stop. Everyone at the table is considering his words, and they're scared of what it means for Laurence. Roman points out the fact that the soldiers are still carrying their dead comrades outside, and because of that, Barco cannot be forgiven. He urges them to show the world the retribution that will be meted out to those who messed with Laurence. Flora's father realizes that, but their military strength isn't optimal. Roman goes to his side and tells him that there's a way, knowing they'll have no choice but to fall prey to predators. In the Barco camp, the Lord is angry, wondering what kind of clause Roman has to interfere in this war. And in order to reverse this unfavorable situation, only a single combat will solve it. And Roman suggests the same thing to the Viscount. It's an old tradition where both parties knew and accepted the rules for the duel, involving up to 3 swordsmen, as a holy ceremony blessed by Valhalla, with an organizer and a central government supervisor. Flora's father says single combat has long been a war of connections and wealth, and their opponent is Barco, who has central government connections and a massive gold bank loan. Who knows what sort of master they will ask to join this battle? Roman tells him not to worry about any of it because he has the solution. The Viscount says that the Barco has a 3-star warrior that'll be their fighter, and Roman volunteers to represent Laurence and be the first fighter. It doesn't matter if his opponent is Barco's knight or an outside fighter because he's confident that he can deliver a victory. However, no matter how good a fighter he is, it doesn't mean anything to win once but lose twice. So, the third battle will be run by Chris since Roman feels his intelligence can help him defeat a 3-star despite being a 2-star. Then he continues to tell everyone in the room they should feel confident because if they manage to achieve victory in the single combat, they'll regain the reputation of Laurence again. Roman immediately looks at Flora, silently asking for support. Then, he tells everyone to consider his idea, and Flora finally understands what he means. Flora remembered her promise a while ago, and wondered if this is what he wanted. She knows Roman volunteers in the single combat, so Laurence could deal with unexpected problems on their own. And that makes him a dangerous person. However, she had no choice but to support the single combat. The single combat was decided following the agreement of both parties. After the message was sent, it was set within a week. The overseer, Count Ertz, announces the single combat is a holy battle blessed by Valhalla, so no matter what the outcome, both sides must accept it, and anyone who violates the rules will be judged with the honor of the Kingdom of Cairo. Then Ertz asks both sides to give him a list of their fighters, and Roman observes how calm the Barco appears to be. Seeing their suspicious behavior, he tells the Viscount to change the order of the fights. Flora's father wonders why they had to change the order of the fights when they had already decided on it a week ago, and Roman suspects they delayed this combat on purpose. He notices how calm the Barcos are and thinks that they have hired strong outside soldiers. In one corner of the place, there's someone sleeping on a chair, and when Roman notices him, he realizes that he's Barco's winning card. So Flora's father asked how Roman would change the order. Initially, Roman intended to secure the first win, and the second one would be done by Lawrence's knight and Chris, who gave the last win. Knowing that they had a new variable, he suggested that Chris go first, making both Flora and her father surprised. He will be the second to counter Barco's card because he'll change the plan to outperform the others. Finally, the first battle began, and people gathered at the bench and murmured about the fight. The fighter introduces themselves to each other. Barco's first fighter is Jansen, a 3-star aura knight that'll go against Chris. The spectators see Chris and regretting the fact that Dimitri gave up a skilled knight in this fight. While Chris believes one must take a risk to become stronger, that's why he left Dimitri's knight and decided to follow Roman. When they saw the sign that the fight was about to start, they immediately moved forward. Jansen unleashes his aura and launches a quick attack at Chris, but he is still able to dodge it because he remembers one thing when he fought against Roman. No matter how strong his aura is, it's considered a success if he lands a strike on his opponent. Now, his options are to dodge and evade until he sees a chance. But the attack doesn't stop there as Jansen lands another blow to Chris, but he quickly moves away. And just like that, Jansen keeps attacking while Chris dodges it over and over. Chris is struggling to find an opening. Jansen got angry when none of his blows hit Chris, and he started to curse at him while aiming to kill him on the spot. Now Chris is truly cornered because the aura is a wide-range attack, and he can't dodge it. While Chris is blindsided, he suddenly remembers Roman's words that he should be able to distance himself from the logic of the world. And Chris finally realizes that Roman is right. Chris began to channel his mana to his sword and focus on it, then narrow it into a line. And then the line became the focal point. His sword glowed bright blue as the power of the aura became focused at one point, just like what Roman had shown him. As they unleashed their techniques on each other, Chris finally won the battle by beheading Jansen in one fell swoop. Jansen's head rolled on the ground while the crowd immediately started to chant Chris's name. He's panting but glad that as a 2-star knight, he managed to defeat a 3-star knight. And Roman, who sees Chris won the battle, smiles. Meanwhile, a visibly angry Lord Barco is shocked that Jansen has lost because he's planning to end all this in the second duel. But the last duel is the most important now. However, he doesn't have to worry about the second duel because his winning card costs him a lot of money. And that card is the person sleeping next to him. A soldier woke him up because it was his turn. He, who was already awake, stepped up to the plate with pride. Then, he introduced himself as Homeros, a 4-star aura knight. Chris, Flora, and her father are surprised to hear his name because he's known as a ranker. It is known that Homeros is ranked 49th out of 100 knights known for their strength. And those ranks came from the Valhalla Kingdom, which was a holy place where people who died with honor were said to go. They risked their lives to get to Valhalla because they wanted their strength to be known. The results of their battles were recorded, and that was the beginning of ranking, which is part of Valhalla culture. But as the Valhalla Empire spread across the continent and their power grew, 100 ranks began to be defined specifically by the Valhalla Empire. Flora's father doesn't expect Barco to hire Homeros as a fighter. Everyone in Cairo heard of him seeing worthy opponents until he's known as a wandering swordsman. The audience in the back says all kinds of his achievements and thinks this will be the end for Laurence. Homeros is still sleepy while Roman, who heard the noise around him, just smiles. He finally realizes that Barco had hired a 4-star aura knight because his investigation with the help of the Information Guild only turned up small pieces of information. There is no doubt that Homeros is their winning card, and Roman can't wait to fight him. Most people don't realize how strong he is, and this is his chance to fight a strong man he's only read about in books. As Roman is about to climb the match ring, Flora holds him back and tells him to surrender because there's no way he can beat a ranked person. She then asks him to save his life and wait for the next duel. Homraz, who hears the commotion on Lawrence's side, takes a peek at Roman and doesn't like how confident Roman's gaze is. Flora keeps urging Roman to surrender because there's no reason for him to risk his life in a duel that he's going to lose. Roman withdraws his hand from Flora's grasp and tells her to stop nagging him. Roman went to the ring and introduced himself, and they both got their sword ready as they waited for the signal for the match to begin. Homeros thinks that if Roman is capable of destroying the flare, then he's at least a 2-star aura warrior. That assumption makes him want to hurry things up, and after the signal for the match to begin, he immediately moves quickly towards Roman. Chris and Kevin, who see it from the sideline, are surprised at the speed Homeros shows, and his sword clashes with Roman's sword. However, his quick attack was blocked by Roman. He then moved behind Roman with his speed, noticing that Roman could be a very interesting enemy. Roman immediately turned around after seeing Homeros move behind him and channel his demonic arts. Homeros wonders what kind of technique he uses to materialize the aura. Roman is hoping to get a decent fight after so long, but Homeros underestimates him and doesn't bring out all his strength. Homeros began to take him seriously, and the aura he released overflowed out of his body, causing great pressure, and it had an effect on the audience. After seeing Homeros' true ability, Roman is disappointed that someone like him is ranked 49th. He doesn't see any point in prolonging this duel, so he's going to end it quickly. Roman tells Homeros to block his attack if he can as he activates the Heavenly Demon's sword technique, making his sword engulfed with dark energy. This technique is shapeless, and Homeros, who sees it, can't imagine how aura can be controlled like this, and he's soon consumed by the black waves released by Roman's technique. Homeros is killed in an instant as Roman walks away from his corpse. Every technique he uses has no name, so they all just follow their respective numbers. That Heavenly Demon technique was the third move, and at the same time, after releasing the technique, Roman's hair turned black again. A few days before the start of the single combat, the Barco family asked the Mercenary Guild to send one of its best fighters to the single combat. The leader of the Mercenary Guild asks Homeros to join on behalf of the Barco family. Homeros understands since he's always turned down jobs before he got the rank mercenary label, and now that he's busy fighting strong people all over the land, he knows he can't say no. Back to the single combat. Flora, along with the other audience, is surprised to see Homeros die. Superstar Cairo, who had already gained a rank even before reaching 4 stars, and the one who tried to surpass the 30th rank was killed with a single slash by Roman. Roman glances back and wonders how people who hadn't even reached the top dared to be so arrogant. His standards were not based on this world but rather on his past. Miram was like a universe filled with death that awaits those who let their guard down, while the mindset of people in this world is completely inefficient and trashy. Then Roman tells the referee to announce the result. The referee who was leading the single combat announced, while stammering in fear, that the winner of the second duel was Roman Dimitri from the Laurence. It's no different with the Barco soldiers who still can't believe Roman killed Homeros. And from Chris' point of view, he just learned the actual power of Roman. He wonders when he already has this power because he's not strong enough to defeat Homeros when they fight together. Moreover, he didn't have much time after that, so this is logically impossible. As he sees Roman descending the stairs, he feels defeated because he thinks that he could catch up to him after defeating Jansen. But the gap is actually far away. Now that the winner of the single combat was set, there was no need to send someone to continue the duel. So, families are allowed to change the list, and both families are allowed to send new warriors after discussion. On the Barco side, the Lord is trembling as he looks down, wondering how a 4-star warrior can be defeated by someone like Roman. Homeros is not like an ordinary Northeast warrior, and the thought that the Mercenary Guild sent a fake Homeros seeps into his mind. Then, his bodyguard approaches him, saying they should send a warrior, so he tells him to send Benson. The bodyguard is stunned at the order, and since Benson damaged the Barco family's reputation during the noble feast, he must have ordered him to die. While shaking with fear, Benson introduced himself, and no one in the audience recognized him. Chris and Kevin are shocked to find out that the man in the ring was the one who had bullied them in the past. Kevin quickly turns around and faces Roman, saying he wants to fight him. As Roman looked into Kevin's eyes and said to himself, in a world of survival of the fittest, the only thing given to losers is death. Even if Benson is a starless knight, he is still a tough enemy for Kevin, and Roman figures Kevin must be trying to show how useful he is. So he smiles and gives him permission. Then Kevin left while replying he'll be right back. Still trembling with fear, Benson wonders how he got into this mess when he stepped on a promising path without the slightest fear because his father was a Barco knight. He does everything he can to show his loyalty to Barco, and now he has to die in the single combat. When Benson saw that his opponent was Kevin, Benson smiled wickedly. He mocks Kevin for wanting revenge for what happened, and then he says they've both been banished by their master. Kevin replies that he's just a sword protecting Roman. After hearing Kevin's words, Benson threatens to kill him while attacking him, but Kevin dodges Benson's attack. And then Kevin tries to launch his attack when he notices his sword is pointing at his throat. Benson, who sees it, is surprised, and before Kevin's attack pierces his throat, Benson kicks Kevin. Kevin, who received Benson's kick, was knocked down several feet and bleeding, but he endured the pain, trying to get up. On the side of Chris, he notices the large difference in their bodies. He wonders what Roman was thinking of sending Kevin out there. Benson's strength quickly overpowered Kevin, and since he couldn't match his attack, he had to take the hit. In the heat of the moment, Kevin felt that something in his mind kept telling him to kill his enemy.